Dana Whitelaw, DanaWhitelaw.
All right. Where do you live, and have you always lived here?
I live in Bend, Oregon, and I have not always lived here, but grew up in the state of Oregon.
So where else have you lived?
I have lived in Missoula, Montana, Boulder, Colorado, Boston, Massachusetts, and then I did quite a bit of research overseas, so Ethiopia, South Africa, Madagascar, Kenya.
So what would you miss most if you had to leave Bend tomorrow?
I would miss forests.
For those people who've never been to Bend, what would you want them to know about Bend, Oregon?
Bend is on the edge of the high desert region, which is a large expanse of the Intermountain West. So it is a gateway to a relatively unknown and relatively unpopulated area of our country that hosts a rich and robust, diverse group of communities. And because it's on the cusp of that, the high desert, it is a mixture of lakes and mountains and rivers and forests in this really dynamic and complex biologically area.
So how do you earn your livelihood? What's your game? What do you do?
I run a museum, and it is an interdisciplinary museum called the High Desert Museum. My background's in anthropology, and I actually studied wildlife for my research. So the museum is a mix of live animals, rich culture from the people who have been here since time immemorial, and contemporary dynamics.
So in one or two words, how would you describe the year 2020? And then why did you choose those one or two words?
The two words that I would choose to describe 2020 is, the first one that came to mind is sad, and the second one is opportunity. And sad because of what I've witnessed personally and professionally in closing down my museum, and how contrary to the work that we want to do here that process has been. And then the opportunity that this is really a time for us to step up.
So describe the moment COVID-19 became real to you, and how did that make you feel?
COVID-19 became real to me on Monday, March 16th, when I just had a board meeting the previous Friday, and it was all COVID of cash projections if we have to close, but I didn't think we had to close yet. And then 2 days later, this incredible sadness of this will be the last day the museum is open.
So how did your daily life change at first, and then how did that affect you?
My daily life changed to triage. And I hesitate to use that word because that is a medically focused word, but things were happening so quickly and changing so quickly that staffing wise, funding wise, what I had to pay attention to. So that just this very high energy, all of us were kind of at the red line of what this meant for us operationally at the museum. And then very personally, my sister is a leukemia survivor. She was diagnosed last year, and I was her stem cell donor. So she and I have gone through something so dramatic and successful, and I have been just really tightly connected with her to make sure that she stays safe. But honestly, she's been taking care of herself and wearing masks and washing her hands for over a year now, so she's way ahead of us.
Where does she live?
Out in Temelo, so between Bend and Sisters. Yeah.
How have your routines and habits changed in your daily life, and which of them have emerged that you want to keep going forward once we get through this era?
My daily routines have changed. And I would say that there was an evolution of a routine where at first it was sort of that triage, just everything was not a routine. And then I am a fairly disciplined person. So I like, okay, let's get that schedule back on track. I run every morning, so I was able to get that back. But homeschooling, I have a 17 and 12-year-old. So I was telling my husband that I specialized in PE every afternoon. So I'd make sure that we got out and we started calling it like AP PE and honors PE for like trail running, out for skiing and things like that. So we excelled at that particular subject. So that was really good. And then it took me a while to do the work at home thing because the museum is so embedded in what we do. We run a museum. And so that became much more kind of normal. And the things that I want to take forward, cooking every dinner. I love that. And not that we didn't do a lot of that before, but it became easier and easier to have, meals from scratch, and because you're shopping once a week and you're planning your meals, and so that'll stay.
So, how many people are on your team at the museum, and what was it like helping them navigate what's going on?
We have 5 members of the senior team and 55 full-time staff pre-COVID, and we're down to 45 now. So, helping them through this, we definitely, for example, my CFO and I, we were pretty much the main ones figuring out the Paycheck Protection Program loan together and everything. And there was a moment when we looked at each other and we were like, our new job is saving the museum. And that was very profound, that it's not running the museum anymore. It's making sure we can get through this. And then so interesting seeing how different people have responded to this. So there's a combination of really supporting a couple members of the senior team who this was an emotional process and needing extra support there, to the other side of it who are more kind of steady state. We got this. I don't know if we've never done this before, but we're going to figure it out.
So now that we're about 100 days into this, what is your daily life like now? Because you might want to share about what happened to the museum, how long it was shut down, and what's going on.
Now that we're about 100 days into this, and the museum closed, March 17th was our first day of closure. June 17th was the first day that we reopened. And so through the evolution of that process, and I would say it was about half closing down the museum, and then we started thinking about reopening, and in that whole new way that we operate in the COVID world. And the question is, how has our routine changed now?
Yeah, what's your daily life like now? I mean, now that we're 100 days in, you guys got a groove, you got new things, you're back open. What's life like now?
Life now that we're back open feels tentative. Daily life is tentative and positive. The routine is back. And I think there's such joy to having visitors back in the museum. And that's something that I saw on every staff member's face. And even just the kind of like grumpy ones were walking out to see visitors. And it was a great moment to have kids laughing, running, and all of that is okay here at the High Desert Museum. We encourage all emotions, and that it's great to have that back.
So, what's been the biggest challenge for you throughout the pandemic?
The biggest challenge for me during the pandemic was, and I am one of those reluctant leaders where, if you'd asked me 15 years ago if I was going to be in this position, I would no, that's not me. And really having to step into it and knowing that I've never done this before, and but I know I can figure it out, and that goes back to being a graduate student and a PhD student, figuring out how to run a research project in Madagascar, and thinking days there where I have no idea what I'm doing. I better figure this out, and I'm really grateful for that training. So the biggest challenge was just reminding myself, I think, this is going to be tough. This is probably the most challenging thing that I've gone through personally and professionally. And we've had some very challenging things happen at the museum. We had an officer-involved shooting here in 2016. We lost a staff member at the museum during work hours to a catastrophic cardiac event. And early in the pandemic days, I thought, I thought I had done all the hard things. Those were really hard for our team and our community here at the museum. And I'm grateful for those leadership challenges too, to be like, okay, that was hard. This is hard. And knowing that there is a way to navigate through it.
So how do you think your daily life will feel like 2 years from now? 2 years from now, what do you think it's going to feel like?
Daily life in 2 years. And I have a pandemic strategic plan that gets me to that 2-year point. So it had 3 phases: the closure phase, which we've just come out of. Now we're in the reopening phase, which I think will last about a year to kind of get through maybe another closure phase. And then we enter into rebuilding phase. So in 2 years, we are going to be rebuilding to the place and the platform that the museum was at the end of February, early March, which was poised to start an amazing capital campaign and really take this organization to the next level, to be a center for the high desert.
So in the challenges you see here at work and then in your community, what excites you about solving them?
I am excited about solving the challenges that I see here at the museum and in the community from the perspective of a museum professional, that museums are places of community and connection and understanding, and that we are poised to do this work together and step in. I'm so glad to be open to just start that process. But museums tend to be places where people with different perspectives come. We are not necessarily the lightning strike for controversy, and that is a huge strength to bring people together who have different challenges, different perspectives, and provide a grounding foundation for building community.
So in the last few weeks since Memorial Day, we've had an emergence of this conversation around racial injustice. And I'm curious, what was your reaction to the George Floyd incident? And then how would you characterize or describe how the Bend community has kind of reacted to this moment as well?
Observing the past couple of weeks of protests after George Floyd's murder and the reaction to that, personally, there's profound sadness. And I think professionally, we as anthropologists, we study these things, and this is nothing new, which is maybe for some members of community are finally kind of seeing this has been going on for centuries and centuries. And I think about our indigenous partners here in the high desert and the plateau, and very similar patterns of behavior and systemic racism that transcends so many cultures in our community that are not totally visible. And I think that that's something that has come to light in our community, is realizing, I think at first glance, we are not at first glance, we are not a racially diverse community, but there is such rich diversity here. And my hope is that those stories and voices will become even more important, and the museum has a role to play in that.
I'm curious, given your background, the studies you've done, anthropology and biology, and this experience of creating the museum perspective, what lessons can we draw from what you've studied? What are the things and observations that you think will help people get through the pandemic and also help us navigate this racial injustice conversation?
I think what I see from an anthropology background and an interdisciplinary approach that really helps me approach my work at the museum and in the community is, and a key part of anthropology is being a participant observer, which is you are part of the activities and you are observing with an open mind, with curiosity. If all of us approached these narratives and stories and situations with curiosity and wonder to learn more, to understand more, that has, I think, profound implications for humanity, for the positive.
So what one or two words would describe how you feel about the next 5 years, now that you've got your 2-year master plan already up?
Oh yeah, got that totally dialed. 2 words for the next 5 years. Well, I tend to be an eternal optimist, so I see those words. The first one that came to mind was hope. And the second one, I think of vision. Let's have a vision for what we want this community, for this region to look like, and put some steps in place to get there.
So, is there any questions that I should have asked you that I haven't, or is it something that you're like, please ask me this because I want to talk about this?
I think we got all of them. Those were good questions.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I do have one final one.
Okay.
This is documentary is going to be on the internet, right? So we don't know when people are going to watch it, where they're going to watch it, but we know someone's watching this moment right now. What message would you want to kind of put in that time capsule so when they open it up, this message is waiting for them?
I hope that this moment in 2020 provides a spark for people to be more curious about our world. And we are seeing social and health issues that are transformative. And we need to use this moment to transform. It's a catalyst for change.
And then I think since we're in the city in the high desert, I guess my final question would be, what lessons can we draw from the high desert? Well, first of all, can you explain to people what is the high desert a little bit, just as you did before, but just hit that and then what lessons could we learn from
this region?
Yeah.
So the high desert is a significant portion of the Intermountain West, and we are on the western edge of it, nestled on the eastern side of the Cascades. And the eastern boundary is the western slope of the Rockies. High desert goes up to the southern part of British Columbia and all the way down to the very northern part of Arizona. So we're talking about a huge part, Columbia Plateau, Great Basin. And the lessons that this rich and diverse part of our nation can bring, we are a mix of vibrant urban metropolitan areas and significant rural populations that have a ton to offer in terms of insight and ways to live collaboratively with the land And there's a wealth of information that and experiences that I think are lessons for all of us throughout the country. And I want to go back in time too, that we have significant indigenous populations living in very vibrant communities that have incredible lessons for us. They've done this before and have stories to tell. And this is a great time to embed those in wider humanity.